There's a tremendous amount of brain power sitting to my left. So we're very lucky to have them all here. I'd like to introduce you to them and tell you a little bit more about them than what you see in your program. So first, I want to introduce Andrea, who is sitting here in the middle. Andrea Baillo is a classically trained scientist with a PhD in cancer biology. She has come here today from North Carolina, so I hope you guys can give her a big Texas welcome while she's here. She's worked in multiple roles in the cannabis industry, including working at Green Thumb Industries in research and development. She has been the chief scientific officer at Open Book Extracts, focusing on safety, efficacy, and blue sky science related to cannabinoids. Currently, Andrea works as an executive coach for leaders in high-stakes environments at Rooted for Success. To this conversation, she brings a deep expertise in cannabinoid safety, risk management, and evidence-driven product development. Next, we have Nick Mortillaro. Did I get that correct?
You did.
Oh, yeah, mate. I always want to turn the double O into a Spanish-sounding name, so I didn't want to mutilate that for you. So Nick lives here in Austin. He is a chemical engineer actively working in biotech and cannabis consulting. He has a deep expertise in biosynthesis. He's got a background in biosynthesis of cannabinoids from yeast. He also has expertise in extraction and scaling up manufacturing. He previously worked in biopharma and monoclonal antibodies, and then transitioned into the cannabis industry, owned the business, and was a consultant in Massachusetts. He sold that in 2022 and began consulting for other cannabis companies. Currently, he is involved in 4 Texas companies, including a really cool string of retail locations. He owns a lab that makes nano-emulsion Delta-9 and has a business that sells these really cool age-gated smart kiosk vending machines. Lisa Pittman is here on the end. Lisa is an Austin-based attorney who has been practicing law for over 25 years and has been a staunch advocate since 2015. Lisa has the unique experience of starting out in Texas and then moving to Colorado to work on medical marijuana applications and to help devise the country's first rules with the Colorado Department of Agriculture under the 2014 Farm Bill. Lisa, how long has it been since you've been back in Austin?
Came back in 2019 to get our Texas hemp law passed.
Awesome. Thank you. She represents a large number of local and national cannabis businesses with licensing, contracts, risk management, compliance, litigation, and legislative strategy. And I'm Nishi Whiteley. I'm the COO of Credo Science. We are a cannabis science and innovation company working to make cannabis safer and better. Will you join me in welcoming our panel? So our topic is a pithy one, and so we're going to jump right in, and we have asked Nick to start out by explaining the different types of cannabinoids. So Nick, if you could give us a cannabinoid lesson.
Absolutely. Everyone ready for their chemistry lesson? So go ahead, take out these handy dandy flyers. You'll see them in your blue bags that came with your program. Go ahead, take them out. They are a wonderful, wonderful resource you guys can follow along with, and we'll explore the fascinating world of cannabis chemistry. We're going to start with the fundamentally natural cannabinoids, or the phytocannabinoids as they're called, because they are growing on just the natural plant as it comes right out of the ground. All cannabis actually starts as glucose, and then through a series of enzymes in the flower of the plant, they become metabolites, or they're metabolized. They're transformed through photosynthesis, phytosynthesis in the plant through these enzymes to all these direct downstream metabolites that we know as CBD or THC, but there's well over 120 found naturally occurring in the plant. So depending on where that plant puts energy into, you can have a divineric acid or an oleftolic acid, which produces the regular cannabinoids or the variants, as they're called. So you'll see THCV or CBDV. Those all come from a different starting precursor. But regardless, all cannabinoids start as CBG. That's kind of the grandmother cannabinoid, the most raw one. And as different synthases or enzymes are applied to CBG, it will specialize almost like a stem cell. CBG is almost like a cannabis stem cell that specializes into CBD, THC, CBN, etc. Right? All cannabinoids found in the plant, or the majority of them, are in their raw acid form. Don't be scared of that acid. It's a very natural acid. We have a lot of these natural acids in the botanical world. In order to activate them, we decarboxylate or heat them, which is a simple reaction of light, heat, and energy, which breaks off that acid, usually is carboxylic acid or CO2. And then you've got your active form of THC, which is the one we all know and love and are using all day, every day. But in this, wide variety of naturally occurring cannabinoids, you see a huge variety in what they do. THCV is an appetite suppressant. Regular THC is an appetite stimulant. So even something with a very similar structure, right, can have opposite reactions in the body. And so when evaluating cannabinoids on safety and efficacy, we really need to think of a lot of things, right? Not only is it a THC structure, but what other components are in it? And also, what is your route of administration? Because different cannabinoids can do different things depending on how you ingest them. The next kind of bucket of cannabinoids we have are converted or synthesized cannabinoids. And it's very important that we, at this conference, understand this concept that when a chemist talks about synthesis, they're just talking about a chemical reaction. Synthesis does not mean synthetic, right? The natural plant uses synthesis to convert CBG with an enzyme into a downstream metabolite like THC. And that is a natural synthesis product. You're making something new from a given feedstock. In the lab, a chemist can use CBD in the presence of a catalyst to convert that or isomerize it into delta 8, delta 9, delta 10, a lot of the derivatives that we see in the market now. Next is kind of your full synthetic cannabinoids. These are things like K2, spice, THCO that are not found anywhere in the plant and cannot be derived or converted from simple catalyzed processes, right? You're often using combinatorial chemistry, which is feedstocks that are not cannabinoids at all, and kind of smashing them together to make a cannabinoid-like substance, right? That may have a similar chemical structure, but is very, very different in terms of the effects and the potency.
That's an excellent summary. Thank you.
Of course.
All right. So, Lisa, we're going to go to you next. You've been working on this issue for a very long time, and you've had a seat at the table when people are talking about rulemaking. First, can you talk a little bit about the history of your experience and kind of the evolution of this conversation and why we're so lucky to have scientists sitting here with us today contributing greatly to this conversation? And can you share with us where we are with the Texas definitions of natural, converted, and synthetic cannabinoids?
Sure. Well, take you back in time, back to 2016, let's say. We only had 2 recreational marijuana states, Colorado and Washington. We were under the 2014 Farm Bill. So the major producers there were Colorado, Kentucky, Montana, maybe Washington. Under the 2014 Farm Bill, hemp was still considered marijuana, and it could not leave the state borders. It was just an experimental pilot program at the time. When I went up to Colorado to learn more about marijuana, I was kind of surprised about the hemp thing. We didn't have any hemp. I'd never really heard of hemp or, beyond t-shirts, hemp seed products that we're familiar with at the health store. But as far as hemp, uh, you know, at the time, it was just considered for industrial products like building materials, plastics alternatives, steel alternatives, things like that. And then as far as consumable products, it was just CBD. It was CBD balm for your aching joints, and it was, maybe some gummies to help you sleep. But that's about all we had at the time. People hadn't figured out how to make Delta 8 from CBD yet. They hadn't, none of that. All of the things that were just discussed, we didn't know any of that at the time. We just thought this is a lower THC version of cannabis, and we can do certain things with it, and it's also got some therapeutic properties. And so I would say we started to see CBG and CBN as kind of up and coming cannabinoids around 2019-ish or say, but we didn't see Delta 8 until 2020, I would say. And that was the result of the oversupply and under demand and the COVID shutdown of everything that happened in 2020. We were stuck with all these oversupply, stockpile, and that's when chemists entered the picture and got to work and discovered all these different things that you can do with hemp that is just like what you can do with marijuana. But at the time when we were, I was at the Colorado Department of Agriculture and later at the Texas Department of Agriculture. Both of them put together work groups that had people from all over the industry as we knew it at the time. So there were farmers and there were some little product manufacturers, policymakers, a couple of lawyers. There were very few lawyers involved in anything cannabis way back then. And then the cannabis folks, honestly, remember, this was a decade ago. They were kind of like outlaws. They had this specialized niche knowledge that could only be obtained kind of illegally in the basement. And they were coming to nervously show their face and educate us about, this is how you do this and this and this. And, how things are done with hemp is a little bit different than marijuana, but it's, it's very similar. So in those days, we were trying to put together rules with the notion that this is an industrial product and we have some CBD. And that's why in Texas, we ended up with an attempt at a smoking ban, because at the time, nobody was smoking hemp, but all that was known that you could do with cannabis at the time that was fun, because we didn't have drinks or edibles or vapes or any of that stuff, but in 2019 was smoke it. So in Texas, a concession had to be made to get the law passed. Like, okay, well, you don't need to smoke it, do you, if it's for industrial and CBD? Okay, all right, well, then we'll let you pass it. And so those of you that are here from Texas know what we went through litigation-wise to get some smoking back. But that was just the mentality at the time. And there were no chemists, no scientists, nobody with any understanding of this. Like I said, we only knew about 4 different cannabinoids at the time that were relevant. And so when these rules were initially made, that's why we wonder, like, why are these huge blind spots? Why in Texas do we not have age limits? That's because in 2019, they thought the only thing you can do is smoke it for fun. If we don't let you smoke it, then you can't have it. Ha ha ha. And they weren't thinking about the other 49 states or, other things. So, as time has gone along, now we've got folks like these, highly trained, qualified people that understand the complete science of the plant and how to make all kinds of new cannabinoids. So now we're in this position where we've got all kinds of things: synthetic, semi-synthetic, natural, pure, unpure, comes from who knows where. And so now we're in this bucket of some states trying to claw back, federally trying to claw back the broad definition of hemp, because many federal courts have said even man-made synthetics made from hemp are legal, because that's how broadly hemp is defined. You're going to have to change the definition if you don't want certain cannabinoids to be legal. And so here we are in Texas and in some other states trying to come up with some of those rules. Some states try to pick good and bad cannabinoids. Some states are putting more rules around manufacturing or just trying to eliminate entire categories of products. And so that's kind of what we're here today. And I would really toss to Andrea to discuss what the current definitions of cannabinoid, phyto, synthetic, and so forth under the rules, because she can explain scientifically what it means. I can tell you that to the DEA, what they mean by synthetic is a completely man-made substance like THCO or K2 or spice. So, but scientifically, there's different, interpretations of what is synthetic and, what does it mean to be pure and not pure.
Great. Thank you, Lisa.
Great. Yeah. So I'll just roll right into it. So, I had just recently looked at what the Texas definitions are, and they are very much written from a regulatory lens, right? It looks like, just looking at my notes, it's very intent and outcome focused and based, and it's really looking at like how do we enforce it and create enforceable boundaries with these definitions. Now, there is a whole other group of people at the American Standards of Testing and Materials, ASTM, that is taking this same approach and trying to define it so that way we can create common language for regulators to use. And this is much more based on process and composition and using descriptive classifications. And so it's technical clarity with real markers driving that definition as compared to what's happening. What I've seen so far in the definitions in Texas is that they're much more category driven. And the concern from a scientific perspective is just that the language is being used as a proxy for safety. And that is not the case, right? So just because it's natural, semi-synthetic, or synthetic, the different cannabinoids can exist across all those categories, right? So I, having worked at a hemp company, we were making THCV from citrus peel. That is a non-natural starting, right? That is non-botanical material. So it's want to be very clear and make sure this is kind of one of the take-home messages is that when you are classifying these cannabinoids, which under the Texas the first one I saw for phytocannabinoids was like includes CBG, CBC, THCV. But again, THCV can exist in the other categories. It can be synthetic, it can be semi-synthetic, or it could be natural. So that was the main thing. It's, two lenses here, wanting to reinforce it in Texas and using enforceable boundaries versus ASTM, which is using science. And so my recommendation really is always to use the science as the main base. So we're all clear, and every state in all the US will use hopefully these same definitions, and then go ahead and build the policy on top and surrounding and supporting based on the real technical clarity of what a cannabinoid is. Is that helpful?
I'd like to ask you a follow-up question. We're going to go off script just a little bit. So, one of the things that we discussed as a group before we started this panel is that we feel like so many of the definitions that we're working from come from a place of considerable judgment. And that when we're talking about science, there really isn't a place for judgment in those definitions. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, I mean, there's words being used like purposefully, mimic, talking about if it interacts with the endocannabinoid system. And so the words just used in the nomenclature just tend towards more of a judgment perspective, like versus science is there's no judgment. It just is what it is, right? It's a composition based approach. And so I think, that's the main difference. And like I said, I don't think either wrong. I completely see how those were written. And I think they are 100%. Like, I see you guys are really trying to focus on safety and like, hello, yes, it's like I'm all about safety. And it's just a matter of layering that policy on top of what the science says. So there's a real clarity around the cannabinoids and we don't get more loopholes. Now you can build your policy around that.
Great. Thank you. So this past legislative session, I am one of the people who is guilty of advocating for not allowing synthetics in the market. And the primary reason that I have been advocating for that is because our conversation really had not yet evolved to the point where it had, we could really talk about that. So many of the people that we were lobbying to didn't have a deep enough understanding of cannabis chemistry yet to be able to understand that you can actually have pure synthetics that are safe. But that wasn't what was happening in Texas. And so many of the synthetics were what I would call dirty. And so, Nick, if you could talk to us a little bit about concerns you might have as both a manufacturer and a retail operator and someone who has a deep understanding of the endocannabinoid system, what are your concerns about the synthetics that have been in our marketplace?
Yeah, that's a great question. Whether something is natural or artificial has nothing to do with safety. If it's safety, if it's past toxicology testing, if it's been third-party lab testing, and it's shelf stable, it's safe, right? The aspirin that we use, for example, every day used to be made from tree bark. It's not anymore. It's synthetic, but it's still safe. It's still cleared by our FDA. So we need to move away from this paradigm of if it's synthetic, it's dangerous, and if it's natural, it's safe. Even naturally occurring D9 can be unsafe if that bud is left to mold with mycotoxins, right? It could still be hugely detrimental to a medical patient. So for consumers and retailers today, specifically in the Texas market, these are a few things that I would look out for, especially when it comes to synthetics. The first is COAs. They need to be recent. Something might be safe. It
What's
may
the
be
COA?
a certificate of analysis. That is what shows all the cannabinoids. You want a full panel that does mycotoxin testing, heavy metals testing, your cannabinoid potency, ideally terpenes as well.
What are phytotoxins?
Mycotoxins are products produced by mold that can get into that flower. And especially when you concentrate cannabis bud, you extract it for the oil, turning it into something that would go into a vape or edibles, you can actually concentrate those mycotoxins as well. So especially if you're a medical patient with an autoimmune disease, it is crucial that your bud is being tested for mycotoxins. And they exist in natural plant-based medicine as well. So just because something is natural, we still need to do the testing to prove that it is safe.
Yep. Right. Did you want to talk a minute about dangerous components in vaporized products?
Absolutely. So one of the key things here is we forgot about this because the COVID pandemic happened, but there was a terrible EVALI pandemic with vapes that had vitamin E acetate in them, right? Vitamin E acetate is generally recognized as safe by the FDA for topical applications. So when people first started doing hemp-derived cannabinoid products, it was a lot of lotions, CBD lotions, tinctures, that kind of thing. When you vaporize it, a compound that is well known to be safe, lots of research on its safety, turns into something very different when vaped under high temperatures, right? So the same compound, which we all know to be safe, can cause vastly different effects when it's used at high temperatures or in a way that was not originally thought of, right? Same thing, unfortunately, for shelf stability, right? Something may have great lab tests when you first put it on the shelf, but what happens in 3 months, 6 months, a year? It oxidizes. It changes over time. Just because your salsa was yummy and fresh when you put it on the shelf doesn't mean it's safe for consumption months later. So consumers and retailers, you need to be looking at these products when they're on the shelf, not only looking for that COA symbol to see what is in it, but when was it tested? Because if it's more than 12 months, I wouldn't touch it.
Excellent. Thank you. Next, we're going to go to Lisa. And I know you were a consumer safety advocate. So following on to Nick's comment, let's talk a little bit about the legal risks for your clients who are manufacturers that might be selling synthetic products that are potentially contaminated, and how might the risk be different for someone selling untested synthetics versus the company that might be selling something that's legal but also is contaminated?
Okay. Let's see. I mean, there's a couple of different legal risks. You have the category of your regulatory compliance and the type of trouble that you can get into with the State Department of Health Services, fines, product embargo, losing your license, and so forth. You have another category of risk, which is civil liability. If somebody takes your product and claims to be hurt by it, either because there was something wrong or impure about it, or maybe they combined it with alcohol or other drugs, or maybe they're sensitive to it, or who knows, or maybe they tripped and fell in your store when they bought it. So there's all kinds of civil liability, in that bucket when it comes to selling these types of products. And then there's another third bucket of liability and risk, and that's under criminal law and under the Controlled Substances Act, where, just last week we had Supreme Court oral arguments on the Sky Marketing Delta 8 case, where they're trying to figure out, okay, is Delta 8 legal or illegal? By some marks, it's under the Controlled Substances Act. By some marks, it's legal under the broad definition of the Farm Bill and our own hemp statute. So when you're a manufacturer or a retailer of cannabis products, you're kind of in a unique position of that you've got the only product that has the potential to go illegal on you, either over time because the THC level has raised over time, or other things that have happened to the product by virtue of a different test result, or because it's being measured against two different sets of laws. So for example, as a retailer or a manufacturer, under the health department code, you can rely on the COA of the raw materials that were provided to you, or the products that you're going to turn around and resell. You can rely on that. However, under criminal law, if that product that you're selling or using turns out to be 0.4% marijuana or higher, well, that's strict liability. You're strictly liable for selling felony distribution of marijuana. Tell it to the judge what that piece of paper says. And incidentally, I think a lot of us are aware that a lot of times you'll click on a COA of a product at a store, and it will just come up as, page not found, or a general website, or something that doesn't make sense, or maybe it's been falsified, or very commonly what you're getting is the COA from the raw material hemp that when it was harvested a month before it was ready for harvest. So is that really representative of the final product that you're buying 9 months or a year later? So there are all kinds of buckets of risk and liability that you're in selling and manufacturing a product that's subject to different laws. Different laws define THC and marijuana differently. The different laws test it differently. COAs, that's tested at your friendly local hemp lab. You get the results you want, but the Texas Crime Lab decarboxylates. They heat the stuff, so it's going to be marijuana 10 out of 10 times if it's a high THCA product, for example. So you've got all of these factors. The law isn't totally settled yet. So you've really, probably talk about this a little bit later. What can you do? But, record keeping and the new proposed rules that Nishi has put out on December 26th in the Texas Register go over extensive new record keeping requirements that manufacturers and retailers are going to have to comply with on the batch and, everything, like literally from seed to sale. I'd say it's almost more extensive than marijuana record keeping in a marijuana state. So
do you feel like more clarity in the legal language reduces risks for your clients?
Definitely, because right now what we're lacking is clarity, and that kind of goes back to what I said in the beginning, is that these initial rules that were put forth were not with in mind of any of these intoxicating consumable hemp products. We didn't have drinks or vapes or, any of these fun stuff back then. So now they're having to come back and come up with new rules to how to, put the genie back in the bottle and put some parameters around these things and how to limit some things. And the new rules show that they did have chemists in the room this time, and they've come up with very detailed definitions for acceptable THC level, for Delta 9, for decarboxylation, for THCA. These are things that were never addressed in the past, and they're maybe over addressing them now. And some of you might have been aware of the January 9th hearing where, we've been pushing back on some of those proposed rules.
Thank you. So that's a nice segue to Andrea. And let's talk a little bit about what are the quality control measures and the safety data that we really need to have to ensure consumer safety and protection.
Yeah. And this will come down to what I'll say at the end too, which is like, this is all about creating good systems at this point, right? We don't want to have to rely on, perfection from people. And so it's about proper identification and characterization of these cannabinoids. It's about process control and manufacturing. So if we want to implement policy, let's look at how we're going to make sure people produce this well, how they're going to produce it consistently, how they're going to identify it, how they're going to characterize it. Then we can look at what impurities are we not going to allow? what or how pure does it need to be? What contaminants aren't we going to allow? And then we can go into, do we require toxicology studies? Do people have toxicology data that we can already show that these cannabinoids are safe? And then all the way into post-market, post-surveillance in the market, like looking at now accountability, feedback loops, what's happening and collecting that data. That's where I think like the greatest quality control is going to come from a policy and regulatory standpoint, is putting it there, letting the science speak to what the cannabinoids are, and approaching it from the safety angle that Texas is looking for.
Excellent. Thank you. So, Nick, how would what Andrea is talking about impact you as a manufacturer and the owner of a retail establishment?
Yeah. As a manufacturer, I'd like to see Texas go toward, GMP, good manufacturing practice. This is the standard that pharma has. This is the standard that normal, consumable food products meet, where you're able to use grass, generally recognized as safe, products in your formulations, right? And you could use catalysts to convert cannabinoids if they were generally recognized as safe, right? I think that needs to happen on the manufacturer level. And I think actually Texas has come leaps and bounds from where it was just a year ago. The products I see on the market now, fantastic quality compared to, 2020 or 2021. So I think the supply chain is getting better. And I think if you have responsible labs that are producing very, very high quality inputs, all of the products made, whether they're edibles, vapes, different formulations, are going to be much safer. On the retail side, I want to see a lot more education. I don't think that these changes are going to impact my retail locations much because we are already very education focused, right? For example, HHC, hexahydrocannabinol. A lot of people get sketched out by it, right? They don't know what it is, but it is in most times a naturally occurring cannabinoid, although in very, very small amounts. HHC can be made safely in the lab, but it needs to be explained to the customer because it's actually far less potent than THC. So they might have a 50 milligram edible that is HHC, but if they don't understand the difference between HHC and THC, the next time they go to get a 50 milligram edible and it's full Delta-9 THC, they're going to have a very different experience. That all comes down to bud tender training. And so what I am hoping for in these regulations from DSHS is a bud tender training framework, very similar to what TABC has now, where bud tenders have to get certified that they have the base amount of knowledge to sell these products, explain what the different cannabinoids do to different customers, the wide range of psychoactive effects, sleep effects, energy effects, etc. And that's what we're working to build through a framework called CRAFT.
That's awesome. Thank you. You are speaking my language when it comes to education.
Oh, yeah.
That will be my mantra tomorrow when I'm talking about public health. So I invite you guys to join me for that conversation tomorrow at 10. And I appreciate that your retail establishment does make education a priority. Lisa, how do we go about working with lawmakers to make sure that we have thoughtful language on the books and real clarity for compliance? Because I really feel like we have a growing number of businesses that want to be compliant and are focused on consumer safety. And sometimes being able to get the right language on the books is a challenge. So how do we do that?
Well, being involved with your representatives and senators and paying attention to the hearings and what's going on. There were so many opportunities in this past year. There were so many hearings on what was going to happen with the hemp law, and everybody from every part of the industry showed up and testified thoughtfully about what these regulations would mean. A lot of them were sledgehammers instead of scalpels and things like that. And but aside from showing up those hearings and submitting your written public comment, it's also being involved with legislative work. So in the fall, in November of this year, they're going to start pre-filing bills for the 2027 session. So 2026 is a year of huge flux for cannabis. So at the federal level, we have a proposed federal ban, but they have to renegotiate the farm bill. They're filing some other laws to try to retract that ban. And at the same time, President Trump's executive order rescheduling marijuana explicitly protects full spectrum hemp CBD and directs the FDA to get involved and so forth. So we have those changes federally happening. Similarly, with the changes that are going to occur with marijuana moving from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, that's also going to have an impact on both of our marijuana and hemp policies in our 2027 session. As independent as we are in Texas, we follow the feds. So that's why we didn't do the 2014 Farm Bill, because hemp was still marijuana. When the 2018 Farm Bill said, okay, hemp's no longer marijuana, that's when Texas was willing to get on board. So once it comes off of Schedule 1, that removes the justification for the extreme criminal penalties that we have. So I expect to see changes on that. We got some great changes to our compassionate use program. Hopefully they'll throw a few more improvements in there. But what we're really, going to see are huge changes to our hemp program. So we've got these proposed rules in process right now. We should know within a month or so what they're going to be. The Supreme Court's going to decide that Delta 8 Sky marketing case. And, when the dust settles on these federal changes, that's going to impact what our state laws are going to be. So I'm looking forward to great improvement in 2027 on our cannabis policy and laws. And this time now, which wasn't the case 10 years ago, now this has kind of gotten mainstream. There are a lot of people. It's not just niche cannabis lovers. It's all kinds of people that have come to rely over time on various different hemp CBD products that don't want to, even if they could, go to a dispensary and give up their gun rights and get into a government registry and all that kind of stuff. We like just being able to go to the store, find a good trusted supplier and get our products that way or online, and that's under threat because of the bad actors that, just went to town on some of these dirty products and questionable products. Now our therapeutic products are under fire. And there were great social media campaigns. There was a lot of involvement, a lot of grassroots involvement where people from all walks of life were talking about how cannabis helps them. And so that has helped to turn the page. The federal policy relaxing is going to help to turn the page. So keeping a dialogue open with your representatives and senators so that they know how you feel about this, so that they don't think that, for a long time, when I was up there working, back in 2015, they'd say, well, I'm for this, Lisa, but I can't cast a vote in favor of that because my constituents will throw me out of office. And that's what they care most about, is staying in office. So if they know that the constituents now support it, we're now at like 88% approval of cannabis legalization. We finally have a chance to really have hemp and marijuana products that are both safe, that are both tested, and that are both available and accessible to us starting next year, I hope.
Thank you so much. I'd like to take a minute to thank anyone in this office that is working at the Capitol. I felt like last year people really did seek deeply and earnestly to understand the nuances of this topic. It's a lot of information, and I think that many of them have felt like they were drinking from the fire hose, trying to understand all the nomenclature and the different buckets that have to be understood. So your visits to see people in their office are actually making a tremendous difference, because we all have a different voice and a different way of educating, and you never know when you're the one who's going to deliver the message that actually got through. So please make those visits. Want to invite you guys to come up and ask some questions. I'm going to ask these guys one question, and then it's going to be your turn, and we'll have Q&A for 10 to 15 minutes. And then I'm going to ask them.
Let's get interactive, guys.
Question at the end. So get your questions ready. Please come up to the stage. We want to make sure that our virtual audience has the benefit of the questions. So I'm going to give you the microphone so everybody can hear. So my question to you guys, it's the same one. What are the nuances of this topic that you really want people to understand today? So we'll just go in order.
There's a lot. Wow. So synthetic THC has been FDA approved in this country for decades. It's called Marinol, and it's fully FDA approved. And why do they get to sell a synthetic THC? Because they've done the clinical trials to show efficacy and relative safety. I think its profile compared to natural THC is inferior, but they did the studies. So it's really important we start looking at cannabinoids through a context of data-driven safety, not trying to categorize them as synthetic or natural or semi-synthetic or the other. It should be about safety first and foremost. I think that's my main takeaway.
Thank you. Andrea.
I mean, yes, you're here. I think that the main thing is just, again, that the systems are what are going to save you. We don't want to rely on people to be perfect to keep things safe. So if you're really thinking about safety, you're going to think about how you can put systems in place to protect the consumers. And we can go over that a little bit more later, but if you want more, but that's looking at standards, SOPs, workforce training, requiring these things as compared to getting all worked up about definitions when they're just molecules, okay? Because the molecules, again, will cross every single category. So I think that's the main takeaway.
Thank you. Lisa.
Yeah, as far as safety, I mean, if you're a retailer, don't get your products from Harwin. Go to a licensed supplier. Make sure you keep a copy of their license on hand for all of your suppliers. The new rules, I mean, my clients already have a huge paperwork regime where they have a big binder of all their COAs and voluntary spot check testing and all kinds of record keeping. But the new rules are going to require very intensive record keeping, and they're going to require that when the dishes inspector shows up that you've got that whole binder of paperwork that they're going to now require. So just while we're still evolving over time with the quality of the products, keeping in mind what these experts have said to try to seek out raw materials and products for resale that are from trusted, legitimate sources that have valid current COAs and so forth. So that's going to protect you in your business, and it's also going to protect your customers once you sell those products on, and protect you from liability from those products, ending up causing problems later.
Thank you. All right, guys, it's your turn. Who wants to ask us the first question? Not us, them. Oh, come on, don't be shy. I know someone has a big question. I can't speak for these guys, but I don't fight.
I find it.
Shut up. Thank you for being here.
So this is kind of a general chemistry question about cannabinoids. So with delta 8 versus delta 9, it's functionally the same structure minus the double bond being at the 8th versus the 9th carbon. What in the real world, in the human body, that placement of the double bond, what kind of effect, what does that change about the effect that these two very similar cannabinoids have in the human body? I mean, I know we know a little bit about how they differ based on studies and people's self-reporting, but from a chemical angle, I'd love to hear. Thank you.
Almost nothing. So you can think of it, they're both THCs, so their structure is the same. They both have, you can think of it as your hand, 5 fingers, and a thumb. That placement of the double bond just changes a little bit of the electrochemistry in how it binds to your receptors. So delta 8 just binds a little bit weaker to CB1 and CB2 receptors than delta 9 does, just because of the way that stereochemistry works. But functionally, it's almost exactly the same.
That's exactly right. Binding affinity. If you guys have heard of THCP and some of these other ones, it's also the tail of the chain or of the molecule as well. How many carbons there are, that'll also affect binding affinity. So that's really it. And there is tons of studies, like you said, to show that there's really very difference. There's very minimal effect, and it's all self-reported. Let's be real about self-reported outcomes. Are really hard. They're not as great, right? I mean, they're evidence, right? That's what I've done, but they're, realistically, when you look at all of the data that use very not subjective, they're very objective data, it's very, very much the same.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you for the good question. Who's next?
One of the big differences between marinol and the converted cannabinoids is the synthetic byproducts. Can you speak to the safety or toxicity of the synthetic byproducts that are present in almost all converted cannabinoid products?
Yeah, it depends entirely on your initial feedstock. So good in, good out, bad stuff in, bad stuff out. You need very, very, very pure isolate CBD if you're going to be running a conversion process. Otherwise, if you're using distillate or, Lord forbid, broad full spectrum, all of those components that are not CBD, when they get into contact with the catalyst, usually an aprotic solvent, they're going to cause all these other side reactions. So you need a very, very well-controlled reaction in order for it to be safe and limit those detrimental side products.
Right. Yeah, you said it. I mean, basically input material, this, Chris, and also is process control, period, right? And being able to eliminate impurities, but the safety of them, and that, like you probably know just as well as I that there's not a lot, and we don't even know exactly what, like you look at I've seen spectral data that shows tons of peaks that we don't know what they are. And that's actually my biggest concern is always like, look, it only takes a little bit of arsenic or something, right, to hurt you, and a lot of sugar. So it's like a very little bit, and is very, that's where I'm saying. And that I don't want to take away from like to hurt, what we have right now, which is to make more limitations. But if we don't understand those impurities, we need to at least identify the impurities that we know are not safe and put policy around those and testing in place for that. And I mean, I don't know, are you testing? Do you guys do a lot of testing for some of these impurities?
Yep.
He says that he has tested thousands of these and never seen a synthetic byproduct.
One without synthetic.
Without synthetic.
That's what he's saying.
Sorry.
Exactly. So, that's what I mean. Chris, I know each other. Like this, exactly. Like there are going to be, so that's why you guys have to determine what is going to be acceptable and what is not. And with people like testing, third-party testing and support with like Chris and teams are going to be able to help guide that. So collaboration too, like obviously we're doing that here, but where you have me as a scientist who's worked in the manufacturing, it's make sure we're involving third parties, what their capabilities are, because your systems are really only going to be as good as what we're capable of doing. Where are the limitations, and make sure that your policy is sitting around that as well.
That's great. We have time for one more question. Any takers? Counting on you.
So it sounds like pure chemical purity is very important, but then what about the entourage effect of really not knowing all these different chemicals and how they interact? People that have taken Marinol or then had, flour, say there's a huge difference. But it makes the chemistry so much more complicated. So maybe you could just speak to that.
Well, I'm just gonna say right now, like probably everything you're consuming, nothing is full spectrum, and it is like actually probably triggering the entourage effect as much as you would like. If you want the entourage effect, grab a flower and smoke it, like pretty much, right? Because as soon as you start extracting it, you're already removing stelbinoids, you're removing terpenes, you're removing a bunch of other compounds that are very likely contributing to the full entourage effect. Is that helpful?
And that's why, unfortunately, in the pharmaceutical industrial complex that we have in this country, through FDA approval, that is why it is so difficult to get plant-derived medicines approved, because they're not just one thing. It's not just pure THC. It's a beautiful spectrum of terpenes, monoterpenes, sesquiterpenes, all the minor cannabinoids working synergistically together. But the FDA hates that because we don't know how cannabis works. We know that it works, right? We have decades, centuries, millennia of safety and efficacy in humans, but we still don't know all the mechanisms of action of all of these different cannabinoids and how they work. And the FDA does not like that when there is uncertainty. So it's really difficult for cannabis broadly to fit into the box that is our, FDA clinical trial approval process. And that's why I think the cannabis industry as a whole has always been at odds with the larger pharmaceutical industrial complex.
Also, pharmaceutical likes to take a single molecule approach where they want to target one thing. And we all know, like, look at chemotherapy. And I mean, I'm not trying to open a can of worms here, guys, but their single targeted approaches don't work as well as when that's what like cannabis is so special, is that it's able to target multiple different things. Like if you open that map back up, right, there's all these different receptors that it's interacting with. It's not just CB1 or CB2.
Thank you. I also want to add that it is very difficult to get a botanical drug approved by FDA, but they do have a pathway for that, and it is called the Botanical Drug Development Route. And it's not easy, but it has been done. And I'm currently trying to do it as well with a drug to treat ALS. So wish us some luck.
Yes, good luck. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what I'm hoping conferences like this can help do is lower those barriers to entry, get federal funding for these. Yes. Yeah, we know it works. Our veterans, our patients are demanding it. The government, after decades of prohibition, cannabinoid-based therapies have been systematically undervalued and underfunded because that Schedule 1 keeps so many good scientists away.
Amen. Amen. All right, we have just a few minutes. So in closing, I would like to ask our panel, what are the most important things or the most important thing that we can do to reduce risk and improve safety? Sir?
Sure, I'll start. I mean, kind of similar to what I said before, just making sure you're choosing good suppliers and that you're getting all of the paperwork on those products, all the COAs, that you're performing your own tests, and so forth. Just making sure that you're aware of what all of the rules are and that you're following them, and that you have systems, SOPs in place that will ensure that the products you're selling or manufacturing are going to be as safe as possible under the circumstances as they are right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it. I don't know if you guys have heard it yet again, but I'll say it again. Build systems that don't require perfect people. Okay. Like just take the nuance away, keep it simple, build systems, require those systems, and you will have a better opportunity to keep people safe. Because no matter what your regulations are, innovation is going to keep happening, and put the systems in place. That's it.
I have a smart kiosk that'll help with that.
Oh, great.
Checks ID every time. Yeah. Can get all those questions answered. Yeah. I think for me, it's really important that we start to look at everything from a safety perspective first, whether it's natural, how it was made, are crucial components of that. But if you don't know it to be safe, the flower, natural flower, once it has its heavy metals and mycotoxin testing, it's going to be the safest bet, right? The flower that as it comes off the plant is a wonderful place to start. If you don't know in the lab, if you've made something new, if you've made a proprietary blend, watch out for that. The burden of proof is on you as a manufacturer. You have to do the testing to show that it's safe. Otherwise, you should be not allowed to sell it. And I'm really hoping as we kind of develop this 2-track system in Texas, where you've got this kind of recreational hemp market and then the teacup program, that really teacup, can take that mantle on of doing that research and those studies and say, hey, what is this, really small minor cannabinoid that is found in very, very small concentrations, but we think might have a great therapeutic potential. And they're able to do the studies to show efficacy and safety. And then they're able to sell, potentially synthetic cannabinoids or converted cannabinoids or these more novel cannabinoids that have great therapeutic potential, but need the safety and efficacy studies before they're out onto the market.
Great. So clearly you guys can see that Nick knows his stuff. And so I want to give you an opportunity to tell people where they can come and visit an operator who's really, I would consider, the gold standard.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We've got a shop just 5 minutes from here, 1701 Guadalupe on 17th and Guad. It is actually the closest licensed retail hemp dispensary in the state to the state capitol.
And its name?
Leaf and Legends.
Okay.
Yeah,
The one across from the courthouse.
it is indeed. We're right across from the Travis
Great
County
place for a
Courthouse.
dispensary,
Yep.
right?
We get lawyers, we get staffers, and that is the location where we have this smart kiosk with full age verification. So you got to present your ID. It uses facial matching to prove that the ID presented is the same as the person standing in front. The whole system is going to be ISO 27655 certified, which is a federal
That's
age
fancy.
verification. Get ISO accreditations, people. That's what we need to be talking about, because we in the cannabis industry do not have to reinvent the wheel. All of these other industries, they have standards, they have structures on what safety, what efficacy, what training looks like. And we really just need to bring those in from these other industries and formalize this one.
Excellent. Thank you. So I want to thank each of you for attending this conversation. Much appreciation to our wonderful, wonderful panel. I'm excited that we are in a really interesting spot as an industry to be able to start changing the conversation to increase safety, bring more professionalism to the industry. And I really think that all of those things are going to lead us in a very positive area. And I fully expect that consumers are going to start speaking very loudly so that we can help our lawmakers and elected officials evolve on this topic in a very positive way. So I feel like good things are coming, and thank you to all. Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you.